In this video, I'm going to show you from start to finish how to build a brand new PC inside of the Montech Sky Two mid-tower PC case. Whether you're going to be using your PC for gaming, video or photo editing, workstation applications, or just web browsing, this will be the perfect PC for you. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. Like with any build, we're starting off with the motherboard. Here we're using a Socket 1700 CPU. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to push down on this arm. So push it down and then slide out and lift. And that goes ahead and releases this tray right here. We're going to be installing the Intel Core i9-12900KF processor. In order to do that, you'll want to verify that there's a notch right over here and a notch right over here, very close to the edge of the CPU. And then that there's another notch right over here and right over here, a little bit further away. And that's going to go ahead and line up with the notch right here and right here, closer to the bottom, and the notch up here and up here, further away from the top. And then we'll just go ahead and drop that right into place. And you just wiggle it around a little tiny bit just to verify that it's in there nice and snug. Then we'll just go ahead and drop this tray down, push it down, and that's going to go ahead and make this little tray shoot right out. Make sure you save this tray. You don't want to lose it. You want to save it for next time just in case. And then holding this down just to verify that this goes over this lip over here. Holding this tray down, we'll slide this down. And the same way we did before, we'll pull it away, push it down a little tiny bit, and then slide it back under this little arm here. And now we've installed a CPU. Now the next thing we're going to want to install is the memory. So first, you're going to want to unlock DIMM A2 and DIMM B2. Since we only have 2 sticks of memory, these are the slots required for it to work. And if we had 4 sticks, we just go down the line over here. We're going to want to open up DIMM A2 and DIMM B2. That unlocks it so that we can install the memory. And now we're going to go ahead and drop this side of the memory over here. Since there isn't a locking arm, the way this one works is drop it in here, slide it into the notch over here, and push down lightly. But you'll realize that the slot here and the notch right over here don't align. So we'll just turn it around, and now we'll do it again. And that goes ahead and locks the memory in place. You notice that little clip locked back in place. And so we'll do the same with this stick of RAM. Although that one needed to be clicked in place, but more than likely these will clip in place. If they don't, just verify that the memory is properly seated. And now, since this is going to be utilizing liquid cooling, we're going to install the backplate on the motherboard. For the EVGA CLCX 360, we want to verify that all of these are in the proper placement for a Socket 1700 CPU. So we'll go ahead and push this out so that all of them are the same now. So we'll flip the board over. And now we'll push these threadings through these holes right over here. And then just put your hands back here so you can flip the board over. And now you notice those little screw holes sticking right through here. So now we're going to go ahead and apply some thermal paste. I've been using the G-Lid Go Extreme. Put about a pea size right in the center. And then make sure so you could use some for later. And now for Socket 1700, we're going to go ahead and utilize these standoffs right in all 4 of these screw holes. And now we'll go ahead and drop the pump right in place. Notice these standoffs that we placed here, they're going to thread through these holes right over here. I'm going to go ahead and drop it just like this. And I'm pushing down just to evenly spread that thermal paste. And now that we are here, we'll go ahead and put these thumb screws right in all 4 of these screw holes. The way I like to do it is one over here, one diagonally over here, then one over here, and one diagonally over here. And we'll just place it about 50% screwed in. Now diagonally across. I verified with EVGA that no matter where you put the hoses, it will all cool relatively the same. A quick note about the thermal paste. Everybody says the X is right. Everybody says the P is right. Everybody says the credit card method is right. The way you do you, whatever works for you is great. This way it works for me. And now that we have that screwed in, we'll go ahead and screw it in firmly. And now we're good with the pump. We'll go ahead and install the display of the CLCX 360. So we'll slide the cable through this right over here, through these tubes. And then we'll align this little hook and the female side of this connector right over here. And then at the very end, we'll lock it right in place right over here. So attach that little hook right back here, which will set those pins correctly, and everything will lock right in place right over here. So it's all good right there. And then we'll go ahead and attach this cable here. So we'll match the little notch right over here with a notch right over here. And now it's properly attached. Just makes it a lot easier to do that now than when it's inside of the case, no matter what case you're building with. The USB side of the pump that we ran through the hoses over here, we're going to want to connect that to one of the USB headers, for example, right over here, USB 2.0 headers. Just connect that there, and we can deal with this cable a little bit later on. Now, somewhere near the CPU, you're going to have an 8-pin or a 4-pin or two 8-pins or two 4-pins. So what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and connect those ahead of time. That way it makes it a little bit easier to cable when you're inside of the case. So because it is a modular power supply, I'll go ahead, connect that. Okay. And now to get the brand new Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus G drive in the M.2 slot, first we need to unscrew the heatsink. Because this particular one has a locking mechanism here, thankfully we're not going to need to remove any screws off of those retention mechanisms. So we're going to go ahead and just slide these gold fingers right into here. You'll notice there is a little notch right over here, which is going to match with this notch right over here. So we're just going to go ahead and push that right in here. And you want to make sure that these gold fingers disappear. And then push it down. And we're going to move this out of the way and then just slide it down, and we've installed the M.2 drive. And now we'll go ahead and put the heatsink back on. Just match up the screws right over here. And screw them in. So now we've installed the CPU, the liquid cooling unit, the memory, and the M.2 drive. Now we can go ahead and install the motherboard inside of the case. So this liquid cooling adds a little bit of a cable clutter to the build, but anyway, one thing before you put the motherboard in a case you have to realize is you have to make sure that all the standoffs inside of the case match the holes on the motherboard. So for example, there's a hole right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's a standard ATX layout. Now occasionally you're going to find a motherboard with a standoff right over here, maybe a standoff here or a standoff here. That's still considered ATX, but they're adding to it. If there's a hole here or wherever there's an extra hole, make sure you have a standoff behind it and you have a screw in that hole, and you screw the motherboard down in that hole so that all 9, 10, 11, or 12, however many screws the motherboard needs are on that, because if not, there's a chance that you could ground the motherboard and short the motherboard. You definitely don't want to do that. So anyway, let's go inside of the case and verify that there are 9 standoffs in the correct location. So inside of the case, to verify, we can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 standoffs, all in the correct location. So we're good on that. Now, one thing I do recommend, because it's bitten me too many times, is it includes a standoff screw. That means you can place this right over the standoff and then tighten it with a Phillips head. I recommend make sure that all of these are nice and tight. Don't over tighten them to unthread them, but make sure they're tight, because if when you screw it in, they're not tight, chances are when you go to unscrew it later on at some point, it's going to go along with your motherboard. You're going to pull it out of the case. So I just recommend go ahead and drop this on one of the standoffs. Just make sure it's tight. That one was a little tiny bit loose, but not horrible. All right, so now we'll drop the motherboard and the radiator right in place. The radiator will be a little bit more difficult at first, but since we have to keep it kind of close, we'll just set it down for right now, right over here. Now we make sure that all the screw holes are lined up. Now that we have the motherboard in the correct place, we'll go ahead and screw in the board with the motherboard screws. Like we did for the pump, I like to install the screws diagonally here as well. So one over here, 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 and then when we're done, one here, there's already one here, and then one over here, and then we know that it's all lined up, and then we go fill in the remaining screw holes. And you may not want to tighten them all at once. You might want to tighten them after you've done them all, just to go back and verify you've installed all 9. Now that we have all the diagonal ones, we'll go ahead and just install the rest. And we can tighten them up as well. So now that we're going to install the radiator, we need to situate some of the cables first. Like we did for the 2 CPU power cables, the EPS cables, we're going to go ahead and connect everything before we install the radiator, because it blocks off all of these ports up here. So first off, we're going to go ahead and bring in this cable that comes with the CLC360, which connects the PWM cables from the fans on the liquid cooling unit to here. And then we connect this single cable into the pump itself, which will be this cable right over here. So now all 3 fans are connected to the pump via the cable that we connected along the side over here. Then we're going to connect the RGB portion of these fans. The first one into the second one into the third one, and then the third one into the pump right in here. So now everything on the radiator is connected to the pump, and now we have these 2 cables that aren't connected. This is power for everything right up here and here. So then we'll go ahead and connect that PWM cable into a PWM header on the board that is controlled through the BIOS. Now I'm connecting it into the CPU fan cable, but you can connect it through anywhere as long as you can enable PWM within the BIOS. So now what we're going to do is we're going to bundle up all these cables and just slide it through these holes over here. And then I like to zip tie cables to keep everything looking nice and neat. Now, of course, you can't make this look a lot nicer, but I don't want to spend 3 hours on this video. So all of these cables are going to fit right through this grommet over here, or this hole. Now we'll go ahead and install the radiator right up here. Let me bring you in on the other side. And now we'll go ahead and line up all these screw holes right over here. And you have to train those cables sometimes. And because there's so many cables here, it might be a little tight fit. And like before, we're going to screw them in diagonally. I'm going to start off with the pilot hole right over here, so that way it doesn't fly out of place. Okay, now that those are there, we can go ahead and tighten them. Maybe not 100 because that's not all the way in, but we'll get that one in right now. And now we'll go ahead and just add up all the other screws. Okay, now that everything's up, I stood up the case, and now we have, of course, all these cables here we need to situate. But now they're a lot easier to manage because they're out of the way, so we'll deal with that a little bit later on in the video. So right back here, we could see the back plate for the liquid cooling unit. So we're all set there. Now up front here, because we have these grommets, it might be a good idea to just drop this cable through the grommet and then bring it back down here. So same place, just a little bit nicer looking right down here. And then we'll manage all these cables in a second. So now we'll go ahead and we'll attach the USB Type-C cable, which will fit right over here, and we don't need to undo these cables right over here. Then we'll go ahead and feed this PWM connection for the fans and everything. We'll feed it right down here next to where we had the other USB Type 2 we just installed. Now because this is not a Gigabyte board, we don't need the VDG connection, but we will need the ARGB connection for the hub up here. So I'll slide that right down here. And I'm sliding them in all these holes over here because I know where everything is on this board. You may need to look, and that's perfectly fine. Then the front panel header for the microphone and the headphone jack, it's typically on the rear of the motherboard, so I'm gonna slide it at the rear over here. Then the USB 3.0 header is going to be right above the USB Type-C header. So then coming around to the inside of the PC. So the first cable we're going to connect is the HD audio cable. The HD audio header is typically on the bottom left hand corner of the motherboard, but you would want to verify in your motherboard manual. So then on the cable, you'll see there's a missing pin right over here, and there's also a missing pin right towards the top. So we want to make sure that this missing pin is right at the very top, and then just connect that right in here. Easy enough to connect. Then right next to that, we'll find the ARGB cable. Right over here on the motherboard, we'll find two ARGB connections. I'll just connect it on the very left, and the missing pin, same thing, and that's going to be like that. And then we'll connect it just right in here. And then we'll connect the USB connection from the EVGA CLCX 360 liquid cooling unit. Same missing pin right over here. And there's going to be two USB 2.0s on this motherboard right down here. And then the front panel, while that does look like USB, it's front panel, and that goes right over here. Now, just be careful, not every motherboard has this sort of F panel connection. So we'll go ahead and connect that just like this over here. And then we'll also connect the connect to motherboard power. This is for the PWM hub and the ARGB hub that we saw on the rear side of the case. We'll connect that into a PWM header, which is right over here for fans. And we can cut this if we'd like, the label off, but I'll just go ahead and leave that there. And then we'll go ahead and connect the USB Type-C cable right over here to the USB Type-C connection. And then the USB 3.0 cable right over here to the USB 3.0 header. Just make sure that this little notch right over here matches with this notch right over here. USB 3.0, the pins are very delicate, so be very careful when you plug it in. So now that we have this connected, let's go ahead and grab the power supply and connect all those cables real quick. So for the power supply, it's going to fit right in here. But if you notice, there is a frame around here, so we can't just slide the power supply in. We need to come right around here. We'll need to move all these cables and then slide the power supply right in here with the fan face down. This is a modular power supply, so you can add and remove cables as you'd like. If you didn't have a modular power supply, you might have a few more cables. But now we're going to take advantage of this moment and connect those two EPS CPU power connections that we had connected to the motherboard. And we'll just go ahead and connect CPU 1 right in here, and CPU 2 right in here, which is labeled CPU 2. And then again, I'm just going to lift all these cables out of the way, slide the power supply in, and they made this not exactly the size of the power supply, so you are able to fit it in a little bit nicer. So great job, Montech. That makes things so much easier. You'll notice you can almost fit your finger completely right in between the power supply and the ceiling of the power supply shroud. So they have room so you can route cables through there. That's great. Okay. And now we use 4 of the power supply PCIe screws. These screws right over here. And then with our left hand or right hand, depending how you do this, we'll just situate this perfectly so that we can see 1, 2, 3, 4 screw holes. And then we'll go ahead and screw in 1. And we're only screwed in about 50% of the way because we want to make sure all of these screw in perfectly. And now when you have the last one of the 4, then you can screw them in all tightly. Okay, so I mentioned that this is a modular power supply. I only have the cables connected that I need. Now you'll notice there is a white cable. This is a CableMod cable that I got from CableMod. I'll go ahead and put a link down in the description below for my particular power supply, the EVGA 1000 watt P5. And this will be the 12 volt high power connection cable for the 4090. So I'm just gonna put that aside for right now. Normally there would be 3 or 4 PCIe cables, but because I have this cable, it's just one. connecting into 4 connections. Now, since I know the ATX 24 pin is going to connect right around here, I'm just going to go ahead and slide that right in here for now. And then since this cable is going to be more towards the back, I'm just going to route cables back over here so that it has all the room it needs. We'll go ahead and undo the SSD tray to install our 870. We'll go ahead and use 4 of the motherboard SSD screws. We'll place the SSD right in here, and then make sure that we can see all 4 of the screw holes. And then we'll go ahead, screw them in. And I'll just repeat this process along the other 4 off camera. One sec. Now that we're done there, we'll just drop the drive right in place and screw the thumb screw back in. Then actually, before I put that in, what I go ahead and do is connect a SATA cable, the little L right over here, match it up to the little L down here. And then I'll also grab a SATA power cable, that same little L right over here, match it up with this L here, and then connect that. And then I'll go ahead and put that SSD back in place. And then I'll grab that cable, and since we have some SATA connections right over here, I'm going to go ahead and slide this right behind the ATX 24 pin, and actually behind these cables as well, and just hold it there for now. Then, since we have additional SATA cables coming down, I'm going to go ahead and grab this SATA connection here, join that right over here, and then also this SATA connection right down here, and then join it right over here. Right now I'm connecting it just to make it work, to make sure that everything works, and then we're going to go and fast forward, making everything look nice. So then, turning around the computer, first off we'll grab this SATA cable and just connect that to one of these SATA ports. Your board might have some ports over here, either angled sideways or standing straight out, or maybe along the bottom. I have some along the bottom as well, but right over here, the video card is going to block these ports, so you won't see it. And then I'll grab the ATX 24 pin, and then I'll connect that right over here. As I mentioned during the unboxing, the way they did this right over here is beautiful. It adds to great cable management, and then I'll deal with this during the cleanup process. So now, for the most part, everything is connected in the system. We're going to go over more of the cabling in one sec, but the very last piece before we install the video card, which of course would be the last piece of hardware, we're going to go ahead and install the fan that came in the accessories box down here on the bottom of the case. So now we'll just grab the fan, and since we don't want cables just flung across the entire case, I'm going to turn it around so that the cables come out through back here, and then I can feed them down through this hole. And actually what I'll do is I'll just feed them down there now. So since we are going to be connecting the cables through here and then the fan here, we're going to be blocking everything. I want to reiterate where the cables were. Again, we had HD audio right over here. Then we had the only RGB connection here because of the hub in the back. Then the USB connection for the liquid cooling unit, the PWM for the fan hub, and then the front panel button. So we're going to go ahead, slide this down. Maybe not perfect right now, but I'll pull on it on the other side. Then we're going to go ahead and use these screws that came with the case. Just match these up, drop that right in here. I'm just screwing it down for a pilot hole. And then last but not least, now that we have all the pilot screws in, we'll go ahead and just screw them all in nice and tight. kind of a tight fit, but we have everything there now. Now I just need to situate the cables, slide them all down over here, and now let's install the 4090. So before we get the card in, we need to unscrew the second and the third PCIe slots. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick. So now to install a video card, we first need to make sure that these two pieces go in between the motherboard and the case right over here. Then we need to make sure that these gold fingers go all the way into the PCIe slot. Then we also need to make sure that the locking mechanism is unlocked. Right now it's unlocked, like that is locked. Again, like this is unlocked. So then we'll grab the card. Make sure again that it goes between the motherboard and the case, and then line up the PCIe slot. Then once in, make sure that those gold fingers go away. So we'll push the card in, and then you'll see that locking mechanism just lock in place. Okay, now you saw it go up, locking the card in place. Now we'll need to screw in the card over here. Now we need to install the PCIe cable. So we'll just turn the PC around. And thankfully we have the CableMod cable because it makes this so much easier. Rather than fitting 4 fat cables right through here, we can just fit this one thin cable. So right into here. And towards the bottom, and I'm putting my hand in on the other side of the case to grab it, to help it through. Okay, so then we'll come back over here, and now we have the cable, and I'm going to pull it out a little bit more so that none of that excess cable goes into the card, and we'll clean it up in a little bit. So if you remember, the 12 volt high power cable goes connected right over here. This top piece goes connected right over here into that top piece over there. So it's actually a 16-pin cable. Towards the beginning, you were kind of told not to bend this cable, and I try still not to bend it very much. You need to make sure that when you insert this card, you hear the click letting you know that this locking mechanism is in place. So what I'll do is I'll grab that cable, and then I'll just slide it right in here, and I'll make sure I hear that click. Little teeny tiny click, and to make sure, just tugging it a little tiny bit, but I heard the little teeny tiny click. And now what I do in order to bend this cable without pulling the cable out, I just hold it right here so that anything I push down is going to push down on my fingers, and then I bend right here. So I grab it like this and I bend like that. Now of course still a little is going to go here because the cable's attached, but there's going to be a lot less strain on that cable. So we're good there. So now everything is connected here, and then of course down here. So we're all good here. Here is that 12 volt high power cable that I pulled in just on that side. So now the part that you might have missed is I connected the rear fan, this fan right over here, to this controller over here. So now these front two fans, the rear fan, and now the bottom fan, which I will connect right through here, and then the RGB for that bottom cable I will also connect. I have to take off one of these covers, these dust covers, so that I could fit that cable right in here. And now we're completely connected. If we wanted to, we can go ahead and turn on the computer and use it. It's just not going to be incredibly pretty. This might look kind of beautiful on the front, but then we have this we need to deal with. So what I'm going to do, since everything works right now, I'm going to do a time-lapse portion of this video and just make everything look nice. You can still follow along at this point, but you might want to slow it down a little bit if you want to see how to make it look nice and pretty. But again, everything's connected. This will work if we press that power button. I'm just going to make it look pretty. So let's get started. So unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot of room right over here for the ATX 24-pin cable. It is a very thin backing, but so what I did to get this on there was I put this on as well as I could, and then I laid it flat on its back, and then I was able to slide it in just fine. And this is the final product. I think she looks beautiful. I took a few shortcuts, but no matter what, I think it still looks great. We can see all the beautiful cabling right over here. It is very hidden, and then down here as well. The little fan down here does help hide the cabling a little tiny bit, but there was nothing too bad there to begin with. Just so you can see down there a little tiny bit. And that fan, how it helps. And then along the inside there. Then coming along over here, you can see a lot more of that cabling. And a lot of that is hidden right up here. You can't see a lot of it because a lot of it is right underneath this liquid cooling unit or the fans. And it looks beautiful that way because you can barely see it. This clump of cables here went together pretty nicely, and then back over here, zip tied along the back, and I showed you that in the video as well. Then coming along the front, we can see some of that cabling right along here. And then there you can see it's hidden pretty nicely. Not perfect, but not bad either. So in this video, I've taken you from the base case, the Montech Sky 2 case, to a complete system like you see now. There was nothing difficult whatsoever. The cabling got a little tight because there's not a whole lot of room along the back, but regardless, with all the little holes and all the spots that we had, aside from that spot in the back, everything was perfect on the cabling. In my next video, we're going to go ahead and turn her on for the first time so you can see how everything looks. Then we're going to go ahead, flash the BIOS, do some basic BIOS configuration, install Windows 11. Then I'm going to show you how to download and install all of the drivers and do some basic OS tweaking and tuning to get you up and running for your games, your video editing, your photo editing, your word processing, and anything you do on your PC. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please do leave them down below. Thanks so much for stopping by. Iggy with ThisBytesForYou out. See you guys.